a retro ramble with.
This week's special guest produced a game I played more than any other as a kid on the Amiga. He has been making games since the 80s on the 8-bit machines, and still continues today with his latest outing, Sociable Soccer, currently on the Apple platform. Other titles you may just have heard of include Sensible Soccer, Fodder, Lo Mania and Wizball, to just mention a few. It gives me great pleasure to chat to Jon Hare, formerly of Sensible Software and now of Tower Studios.
Hello everybody. Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
It seems a bit surreal because, like I say, the hours I spent playing Sensible Soccer, I dread to think it must have been, if you added them all together, it's probably into years. Did you ever think at the time of making that game that it would have such a massive impact on people?
I think you can't know. I mean, one thing I've noticed in the last 5 or 10 years particularly, because in the last 10 years we've entered a different phase of game development. So we've had like the old era from the really old is 70s, which I even remember playing in when I was younger, just towards the end of it. But mostly 80s is where it really took off. Yeah. And then 90s, and now since we've gone into the touch phone phase, which was from about 2006, we kind of entered a different era of different kind of stuff, different ways of going about stuff. In many ways, I felt when we entered the phone era, game design kind of went backwards in a way. We went back to doing games we did, in my mind, like on the Spectrum or even on the ZX81. Suddenly they're back in vogue again, yeah? Some 8-bit mentality. Of course, the social construction around it is very sophisticated, but the game part, I mean, look at Flappy Bird. It's like a micro, like an early Mario, isn't it? I mean, that is a reality. So, but yeah, I think that we didn't realise that this current generation of younger people are now interfacing with games. But there's an older generation of players who look back on it like you'd look back on a Humphrey Bogart movie, or or listening to, I don't know, the Kinks or Elvis or whatever. Yeah. So we're sort of like back in. We're part of that now. We're part of this history, and it's unusual because this history was never there for computer games when we grew up. We only know it in respect of music, books, films, stuff that we have always liked being taken. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's nice. I think for me, it's not just Sensible Soccer. It's the package. It's Sensible Soccer, Cannon Fodder, Wizball, even Megalomania, even WizKid. People talk about, and WizKid is such a niche, weird, sideways game. So I think to have had, and Parallax, of course. So over that part of time, to have our work remembered in this way is fantastic. It's sorry, you don't get it at the time; you get it after. At the time you're just doing it and it's fun and everyone's going, and Sensible Soccer was the best game. Without that, SWAS is the best game I've ever made. So I understand that. At the time you're just doing it and you're living the moment and stuff. But when you look back, no one can take your history away from you. It's quite interesting, Yeah. That's kind of there. It's like you end up with like, at the moment I'm making Sociable Soccer, for example. So I'm always making a game. So there's always now, and I'm focused on whatever I'm doing now all the time. I mean, this one has been. It's in year number 6 now. We're in 5.5 years through now. The previous one, World Explorer, was like 4 years, and I've done the long games, long time things, and you're always your head's in that, or Speedball I did before that, or whatever the game was I focused on. That's it. That's my world for that time. But the history's there, and the history slowly gathers up. And for us, I suppose the classic history. No one talks to me much about any game I've made past SWAS. Like past about 95, it's the other stuff. I mean, for me, there's been some interesting things, but that that was the classic period. So yeah, I'm kind of delighted that it's gone to, that get people writing books about it, it being in like the BAFTA library, and you start to go and even featured in museums in various places. Not just in the UK either. And you're like, oh, well, this really is turning into history. A postage stamp we had last year.
Funnily enough, I actually work for Royal Mail and I've got the stamps behind me.
There you go. It's like, well, that was it. The stamps. We have arrived moment. And actually we had a conference in London at the time they were being launched. And I managed to get together a small panel, like myself and Debbie and Troy from Team 17, David Darling from Codemasters, one of the Oliver twins, Dizzy, and so a few of us who are games from the stamps were on a panel, and it was brilliant. Like,
the legend,
history,
the legends of gaming, I would call that.
Yeah, it was amazing, and we're just sitting there. Obviously we've known each other since we were young, most of us.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny to like be shoved forward. Yeah.
Do you think as well, modern gaming, like when I was, because I started on the 64 and MSX and all that kind of thing, worked through, and you knew the programmer, so it would be a game from, like you say, Jon Hare, or a game from David Braben or whoever, but now it's from like Electronic Arts or something, so it's sort of more about the software house than it is the person that's created it.
Yeah, I mean, in our days, I mean, we always push forward. Myself and Chris, my partner at Sensible Software, we were just pushing Sensible Software all the time.
Yeah.
The band. We came from a band together, so for us it was just like a software band. Yeah. So, and then when we got more guys joining us, and at the time when we made, well, all the 8-bit era, there's only me and Chris, and Martin Galway joined us for a while. So there's 2/3 of us. I mean, and Martin was with us on the games before he joined us as well. Anyway, the Ocean games. So. Me and Chris all the time, and Martin is kind of like an extra person sometimes. And then when we got to the 16-bit, mostly it was me and Chris. Martin had left to go to America to join Origin, but then Richard Joseph did all our sound, so he was like a kind of like half of his time was spent on our stuff, and he obviously did bitmap stuff on other people's games as well. And then Chris Chapman, Julian Jameson, Stuart Cambridge, Dave Corn joined us for a while, and that was pretty much our team. We were like now a bigger band. Kind of the same thing. And that was kind of... And when we, of course, in the very early days, you had individuals. So when me and Chris were just getting into making games, the people we were taking notice of were like Jeff Minter, Archer McLean.
Yeah.
And then people like Jeff Crammond, who was also doing some great stuff. And a lot of it was individual names making stuff. And then you got like Doug and Bob, who like Bob Stevenson and Doug Hare. I know Doug now, doing his own thing now, but or Stoat and Tim, these names like this. So you got like Tony Crowther and Ben Daglish working together, and you got these partnerships popping up, and that was all brothers. So you've got like the Darling brothers, you've got the Oliver brothers, but then you've got the Cale brothers doing System 3, and you've got, the Stamper brothers, and then you've got the guys at Rebellion, the Kingsleys, and like it's all these pairs of brothers everywhere. And there's weird crossover. So there was a game I did in 1985, I think it was, or 86. I did some graphics for Trivial Pursuit, which was Domark.
Yeah.
And I worked with Oxford Digital Enterprises, which was the developer. So I was basically just me. This was outside of Sensible. And I looked at the credits the other day, and I didn't realise that Jason Kingsley is one of the owners of Rebellion. Me and him did the art together, although we didn't even ever meet each other. So you got these really weird little crossovers where you know someone, you know each other, but you're not quite sure what you've even worked on. So it was fun. You're right. In those days, especially we're talking about the British scene now.
Yeah.
We were just. It wasn't that dissimilar to a happening movement, like if the punk movement started or a music movement started, and you'd kind of like work mostly with your group, but sometimes you'd get together. So like if we went to Zap 64, quite often there'd be us, but there'd be other teams around there. So you'd meet, like I think I met certainly Jeff Minter there, maybe Archer McLean there as well, but you'd meet other developers there or at the shows,
Yeah.
So. But it was very much a sense of it was very much like an old band scene, is all I can describe it. An old band scene from the 80s. Yeah. When I went to school, I was born in 66. So I left school in 84. But I remember that period, like early 80s, late 70s. There was such a buzz in Britain with music. So you had, like, you'd go to school and you'd have... I remember some of the guys going like fashion casualties, changing their look entirely every year. Like the one year he's a punk, then he's like a skinhead, then he's like a new romantic and all this stuff. But and you had ska music, and you had reggae music, and you had rock music, and it was all alive at the same time, you know. So we had a strong identity when I was at school, and then later I went to college in Colchester, like in kind of like an art college, you could say. So there was a really strong identity for these different things. And when I was a kid, my dad is a good level amateur actor. He never was professional, but a good level amateur actor. So I grew up around theatres. So I guess I kind of grew up around this. You can create stuff and do things, and some people make a living from it. And especially British of our age, and especially leaving in the Thatcher years when there were no jobs anyway. You know, went out and made their own thing. You know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that was the energy in the British scene, and it was very much about small groups or individual people or individuals within small groups, as you're describing, and then that was maintained. If you look at us, the Bitmap Brothers, various other teams, we quite strongly maintained our identity as a team,
Yeah.
And then that kind of changed when we went to the console era. So that carried on until about 93. And then in 93, when the Mega Drive really started to take, or the Genesis, depending on where you are in the world, because Nintendo never really got involved. So Nintendo just always pushed Nintendo, right? They were just Nintendo and Mario, and that was about it. Yeah, and we all know that.
Yeah.
They've always ploughed their lone furrow, whilst everyone else is doing their own. Which I love about them, by the way.
Yeah.
But when we got the big, like, especially when Sony moved in, so then you got Sony plus Sega plus you got Microsoft doing the Xbox a bit later. They're all competing with each other. If you look at the history of the small developers and what happened to them, it's quite a marked difference in UK and the US. So whereas you start off with Electronic Arts as a developer, and it quickly becomes this massive
huge thing,
massive and you've got LucasArts, which is George Lucas's arm for games, which becomes big, and you've got various examples. There's a Atari that becomes a monster or whatever. We don't do that. We go be small, stay smallish, you know, and we don't always look to go the corporate way. Certainly in those times we didn't. Some have done it afterwards. Maybe Codemasters is a good example of a company which slowly grew and got bigger and bigger. But in general, our mentality was not to do that. It was to like be the artist creating stuff and then work with publishing, not to self-publish, but to work with publishers as partners to push out your stuff much more in line with what you do as a band or as a book writer or something like that. Where you got your agent, you go to the market that way. So that has always been our tradition. And what you've seen, the reason you've seen these big names pushed now is because we got very Americanized in the console era. So then it became a global market. Now I can tell you, successful as Sensible Soccer and Cannon Fodder particularly have been all around Europe, we never sold anything of either title in the States.
No,
So we resonated not just with the British audience, which was, I think, just under half of our sales were in the UK, but all over Europe, in France, in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, and then across all the part of Europe, they basically just bootlegged games and never bought a copy or pirated them. But you know, all through like Poland and various other countries in Eastern Europe, everyone played our games. They didn't buy them because it was quite hard for them to get legitimate games, especially in the Commodore 64. But they know them, they played them, they're aware of us. So we were very, I mean, we estimate 20-1 piracy in the Amiga years. So
flip it out.
No, I mean, you know, I considering I was personally getting £1 a copy out of the sale from 20 quid, and we sold about 2 million copies. That means 40 million were pirated, which kind of, I must not think about that. But you know, I mean, obviously people wouldn't have bought them if they couldn't pirate them, most of them. But it was a different market. Piracy is a great marketing tool. Spreading word of what you are. And as I get older now, you know, and I've always, you know, I've had good money since I was in my mid-20s, so I can't complain, you know. But in a way, there is a value to that being known as an artist.
To expect it.
Well, no, it's not that. It's more like as an artist, you're running on your ego. So if I go to like there's a show I do every year in Poland, and I play with a band there, but people kind of like, it's not continuous adulation in this world. I've been recognised twice in my life outside of a game show. Twice. so, but in that environment, people know who I am and they'll talk to me, and it's kind of nice validation.
Yeah.
And if you read on the internet, sometimes when people talk about your old stuff and that, it is kind of nice. And no amount of money could buy that feeling of the artistic credibility.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So I would rather have good, like really good money,
Yeah.
but have a bit adulation rather than even more really good money but less acknowledgement of the work.
Yeah.
Because it's a trade-off, you know. There's only so much. If you're not particularly materialistic, which I'm not really, there's only so much you need. You know, I want money for my freedom. I want to do what I want when I want. I want a nice house, which I've got. I want a car and stuff like that. I've got all that stuff. What more do I need? I don't need 6 cars. Bloody hell, we've got 3, me and my wife and my daughter. And one of them's always broken down. I've just been driving around to recharge the battery. So, you know, what more do you need in life, you know?
It's true, though, what you're saying, because, like, in years to come, nobody will remember the people who created FIFA 21. It'll just be, it's FIFA 21. But with Sensible Soccer, they associate you with that. So exactly. You're right what you're saying.
I mean, it's a kind of strange world we're living in, because I always say this. William Shakespeare, how much money did he have when he died?
Probably not a lot.
But the answer is we don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Mozart.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Really? I think he was from a posh family because he was... but you don't really know. And the point is you don't care.
Yeah, yeah.
It's totally irrelevant, you know, really.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about this very modern concept that you value someone and how much money they've got.
Yeah.
Again, it's a very Americanized way of thinking. I don't really understand it. It's like, of course, we all want to... I don't give a shit what money other people have got.
Yeah.
You know, I care about my world in this world. I'm not that interested, you know.
Yeah.
Because there's only so much you can do with it. You know, I mean, if I'd have had a lot more money, then I guess I could have taken more risks with some work stuff, or, you know, pushed some project further this way. Although I've done quite a lot of that anyway, you know, with less. But in terms of what you can achieve, there's only so much you can achieve anyway. You know, if I look at other people I know have taken various routes from the background I'm in, you know, like from those kind of cohort of people, like you talk about David Braben, or you talk about Archie McLean, or you talk about Jeff Minter, or these kind of guys. We've all taken our own routes, and none of them have been, no one's done particularly badly, and none's done particularly wrong. But, you know, I look at David Braben now, has got quite a big company in Cambridge, like not too far from where I live, actually.
Yeah.
And that's his route he's taken, and he's been very successful with Elite Dangerous and some of the other stuff he's done. But even in that case, the problem for people like me and David is we already made our mark when we were young men, and now as we're getting older, you know, I can't recreate that, and B, what's the point? You know, like, okay, so I really desperately want Sociable Soccer to do really, really well, and we're starting to get better and better all the time. It's nice to have a credible game emerging over this time.
Yeah.
But it can't be Sensible Soccer or Cannon Fodder or...
No, it's a one-off, isn't it? It's a one-off feeling, that.
Not just the game, but the time is different. Like,
yeah.
Everything you put out is framed by the time. Now, at the moment, you've got this horrific amount of competition of everything on the internet. Like, everything's clamoring for your attention, right? Yeah. Whatever we do. Like, oh, look, like we're making some content right now, and it's just another piece of content to go wherever, you know.
Yeah.
Because we can't help it. It's what we do, yeah. But in those days, there weren't that many people making games, really. You know, when at the peak of our powers at Sensible in the Amiga years, 3 new games per day were coming out on the Amiga.
Good heck.
And now you look at the mobile world and you've got 500 new games per day.
Every hour, probably.
I mean, that's a 5-year-old figure. But it's like the specialness has been lost because it's become so common in that time, and we were very lucky to to arrive at a new thing at the right time when we could make our mark more easily because there was less people. I mean, we were very good at what we were doing, of course, but there was much less competition.
Yeah.
Which is most of what it's about. So you get the attention, and then people like you could even notice our work. Like, I mean, I'm sure there's like hundreds of teams out there doing as good a work as Sensible Software did back in those days now. But how are you going to find them through all the mess that you've got to hunt through to get to them? I've got no idea.
That's part of it, isn't it? And this goes back to what you said about money. You could have loads of money, but if you hadn't got the kudos, if you like, that will help you in the future, because they'll say, it was Jon Hare who wrote that game, and that gives you probably more than having loads of money sometimes.
It does. It's interesting. I mean, I'll give you a snapshot on that. It's a good question. I've never been asked it before. So about kudos. So when we very first started out at Sensible Software in 1986, me and Chris, we put out games like Parallax was the first, then we had Wizball, and people were going, these guys are interesting. These are interesting games, and the magazines obviously gave attention. There weren't so many things around at the time. So we got that kind of we're interesting on an artistic basis kind of thing.
Yeah.
We didn't make much money at all. The contracts with Ocean we had weren't that great. The royalty statements always said 0. But we were young. It didn't matter, when we were first starting. And then we got to like Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit, which was our first #1 game. So that was nice because then we got a little bit of notoriety,
Yeah.
Okay, we got to #1, and then we got Microprose Soccer, also got to #1, and we got a little bit of a bigger advance, but not much bigger, like 30 grand it was. So, and then you've got like 3D Tennis and Megalomania, and we're starting to continue to make these interesting games, and our artistic credibility is growing. But we hadn't made that much money. So then you hit another phase where, hang on, we've had 3 #1 games, but we're living we both got living in small houses and paying mortgages, and we live in hand to mouth, and we're doing all right, we're surviving.
Yeah.
But that's it. And it's like, hang on, we've got 3 #1 games, and that's all,
Yeah.
So then you hit a different phase where you want more than the notoriety. Now you want to have some kind of financial, remuneration for this as well. And we were quite unlucky with Megalomania because Robert Maxwell jumped off his boat with our first quarter's worth of royalties. So our game was #1. We lost 75 grand, which was 75% of our turnover that year, and the game just kind of died out of the charts. And so what should have been for us, sometimes it's a little frustrating that we made a really good God game that kind of got lost due to issues beyond control, And of course, when you've got hundreds of thousands of people losing their pensions, that's more an important sub story than our sub story. So but yeah, so that kind of went. And then when Sensible Soccer came out in 92, we were like 6 years into our company by then, and Sensible Soccer was our 4th #1 game. It wasn't our first, but that was the one that made loads of money. And it just so happened we had our best royalty deal because we had a 50-50 royalty deal on it. So we'd started at 15% and clawed our way up till we get 50% royalties. And it just happened that the one with the big royalties was the one that was selling the big numbers, albeit being pirated 20 more times. So then that year we made a lot of money. So instantly I could move from a house worth 50 grand to a house worth like about 5 or 6 times more, that, just from one thing. And so that was kind of good. And we kind of that was the start of, okay, we got some money, and then the royalties kept on coming in. Then Canon Fodder went out. Then we sold a big deal to Warner for 3 million quid. So suddenly everything's going up and up and up and up, Yeah. And then you've got a balance of both, because you've got the notoriety and you've got the money coming in. And I guess at that time we kind of felt like we had the Midas touch, and everything we did turned to gold. So we got a bit of an ego about it. And then of course we got to 3D, and then we fucked up really. We underestimated the challenge of taking what we did to 3D.
Yeah.
But the publishers were prepared to pay us 4 times more than normal for these 3D games.
Yeah.
So these publishers offered us like £1 million a game, 4 times more than we'd ever been offered before for the old 2D games. And because we'd had this history of like many years where we hadn't made that much money, we just said yes. We were like, wow, suddenly we're in vogue and we're going to cash in on this big time. But the problem was we bit off more than we could chew, because we were doing too many games, and we underestimated the technology change, and we underestimated the need for needing a middle management layer in our company to cope with more people. So it was a really mismanaged transition from 16-bit to the next generation first 3D computers. And because the transition for us from 8-bit to 16-bit had been so easy, it was seamless. We just thought it would be the same again, and we totally underestimated. Like you said, eventually technology comes and bites you, and that was our big bite of sensible software. And then for me after that, so we eventually managed to sell sensible software at the end of that three product time. We could have, in retrospect, of course, sold for a lot much more money 3 years earlier. Although I'm glad we did those games we did. I'm glad we did Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll. Even though it never came out, I needed to do it creatively.
Yeah.
And then we sold to Codemasters, which was great because I love working with Codemasters. Very friendly with the Darling brothers that were running it and the family there. And I was on a fantastic deal. I mean, I was working 3 days a week, getting paid a lot per day. That was great. That was like a really nice balance. And it was nice to de-stress after 13 years of running your own company.
I can imagine.
So
yeah.
now I am just like, we've managed to get to the end of the road. We nearly fell off a cliff with the 3D. We've stopped our car going off the edge of the cliff by slamming the brakes on it. Managed to run out and free myself of the responsibility a bit. And Chris wanted to go and do his own thing, and I said I would stay, and that was the easiest way to get the thing done. And then after that, after about 3 years of that, of working with Cody's, and then I learned another side, that the good thing about doing your own company is you can do what the hell you want. And when you're working under someone else, they're kind of like we did Kenneth for the 3D, and then that started and stopped 3 times. And it's totally out of my control. They're like, here's a team of amazing programmers, fantastic. Oh, now we're going to take them and put them on something else. And it's like, oh, no. So you're kind of, in a way it's good and in a way it's bad, because you're not got control over stuff. So I ended up working on Nassim boxing towards the end of it, and then doing Mike Tyson boxing, and working with my friends now up in Atomic Planet in Middlesbrough, they were at the time. So, and then I learned this, then I spent a few years off. So basically, I was like, after 3 years of Cody's, it's like, okay, that's 16 years of non-stop work. I'm gonna give myself proper downtime. Yeah. So the World Cup was on. It must have been the 2002 World Cup.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I took a couple, 2 or 3 months off, and I watched every single game on telly. It was amazing, amazing. and they're like a proper football holiday. And then I was like, okay, I'll start up. I'll try doing some consulting. And at this stage, I had like a good amount of money in the bank. Yeah. You know, and I was in no urgent needs to earn immediately, so I thought I'd give myself some time off. And I started doing consulting for small companies that I thought had interesting ideas to help them with design and business. Because what I do is 2 things in a game company: is manage the design side and the creative direction, and also do the deals with companies for like contracts and licensing. And they're the 2 areas that I manage. Yeah. So in terms of as a consultant, when you've got a lot of small startup companies that they need consulting in both areas, like how do you put the product together from a design perspective, and how do you actually sell it, you know? Yeah. So I started to work with some companies, and some of them weren't so great, but some of them were good. I worked with a particularly good company, a very small company called Legbo in Windsor. It was only 2 people. They were like a couple, and and I was helping to sell this, and we made some really, really fun things, you know, that never saw the light of day. We made Fug. Let me see if I can find it for you. Stay there.
Okay, thank you.
Retr0 Dinosaur Maker. So, this game was excellent. So this game here was about making you're like David Attenborough with a cameraman, and you're out in this island, but the island's got dinosaurs on it. That's your species you're filming, and you've got like to film them mating and laying eggs and eating and stuff. But the problem is you got to do it without them eating you. Right. So like if you're too close to them, then they come and chase after you and eat you. You know. Yeah. So the game was about, you had a script for certain scenes you needed to film. It was kind of quite free. So you know, like Pokemon Snap, where you have to take the photos of the little animals. Yeah. Imagine that, but you've got to kind of take small scenes. So you were given a line of script like, and now we see the Stegosaurus laying its eggs in its nest. So you had to like film something going line of dialogue, right? And then at the end, you had your 10 lines of whatever it was in that script, and you put it together to make a small like film about whatever species you were filming.
Yeah.
But the funny thing was, you had like a piece of meat to chuck at it to make it come near you, like to come out, or something vegetable for a herbivore. But then you had to run away from it. So I think there's something else to stop it chasing after you for a while. But it was quite funny, like only the cameraman coming.
So it was how long can you stay there filming it before you get at, basically?
Yeah, and then you when you pieced it together, and you had a couple of freeform things to film the sky and birds flying, or not birds, but what do you call them?
Pterodactyls.
Yeah, pterodactyls. Yeah. And then you put the film together, and then it judged your film like Pokemon Snap, like the thing. It said, "Well, you've got that's a good film. Now go and make another one." So it was a really nice original game. I loved this concept, and we got about halfway through making it. Anyway, in this time, we are now in about 2003, 2004. It is the worst time there ever was to sell original games. So there were so many. It was full of sequels and movie licenses and stuff like that. The market, and the kind of old mobile companies were there.
Yeah. The
Oranges of this world, and to them, games were 2% of their income. They didn't care about them. They were there to make people buy phones because they like games, but they didn't have any respect for games, game makers, anything. They cared zero. You know, they just wanted stuff to put on there. So you've got that. Plus you've got. I mean, this game was for PC, I think, PC and one of the consoles, and the console publishers couldn't sell original product into the retail very easily. It was very, very license and sequel driven. So I remember going to Japan and seeing 4 publishers and taking this game here, their company, and this was a terrible story. I massively overslept because of jet lag, and I got to their office like really late, and it was about 5 in the evening in Japan, and there were 6 of them because they're very polite, like glaring at me as I turn up. Anyway, I showed them the game. They liked the game, and then they said we just would go away and talk to our accounts department, and they went away, and about half an hour later they came back and they said, "We've spoken to our accounts department about your game. We can't find any other game like it on the market to compare it to. So therefore we can't generate a price. So therefore we're not interested."
So that's a joke. You'd have thought they would have took it because of that reason.
Exactly. That shows you how much the market has gone. But I understand why they said it, because the retail market. So in the old days, in the 80s, particularly in the early 90s, you were buying your games from independent game shops mostly, right? Yeah. And the guys running the independent game shops were really enthusiastic gamers who loved all the new games. They loved all this new stuff. They were like, "Wow, look at Lemmings. I've never seen anything like this before. It's amazing," you know.
Yeah.
That was the way their heads were wired. Whereas these guys were now selling through bigger retailers, like the equivalent of our Smiths, I suppose. I can't remember if it was Game in those. It was really been Game in those times. So all these buyers in these shops are mega conservative. Plus, they're starting to get controlled by some publishers, bigger publishers, naming no names, but ones with very few initials, who like buy shelf space. Yeah. They buy the shelf space so that everyone else is crammed into this tiny shelf. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens when your only route to market is by very kind of conservative and controlled channels, the distribution of original stuff gets really, compressed. And so you end up with a Japanese publisher saying to you, "Your game is too original. We can't buy it even though we like it," which is kind of insane, right? And the opposite from the publishing mentality that we encountered in the 80s in the UK, where you've got Ocean going, "Yeah, we love Wizball. It's really original. We want to buy it," or or Palace getting Shoot Up Construction Kit or whatever it might be, or Virgin buying, Cannon Fodder, or Microsoft buying Megalomania or whatever. So the opposite mentality was entrenched at that time, I mean, we made this other game. This and a second one we made by Fugbucker. So Fugbucker he got rid of insects. He's like got rid of vermin. He was like vermin control on spaceships. So it was like some kind of comic character who was always hanging out with some sexy chick in his small space pod in space. like a bike. It was basically like a biker, but in a spaceship, right? Yeah. So he listened to really hardcore music. We made some fun, like heavy music for it, heavy blues stuff. And then he'd like leave his babe in his spaceship, and he'd put his headphones and his big thick suit on, and he'd go with his guns, and they'd call him in to say we're infected with 1 million mega ants, and he'd just go around and just kill them all and, you know, wipe the spaceship clean and then sail off into the sunset to some other babe. So
sounds a bit like Smash TV with that kind of mentality.
Yeah, exactly. So what was quite fun was, for me, this was fun because these guys were really nice to work with, are quite talented, and they were making kind of in the dinosaur game, it was originally going out and shooting. And it was fun for me to be able to go, well, why don't we just do something, put a little small twist on this and just do something with a bit more humour and a bit more interest. It's like kind of 70 or 80% what you started with, but let's just twist it this way a little bit. You know? Again, no hope with this one either, Fugbucker. It was just the wrong time. So then...
Do you think, though, that is almost... a company, the bigger company, literally stifling creativity because they're purchasing the shelf space. So in reality, it's almost like when bigger companies buy a smaller companies, not to progress something, but to stop impact on their things. Do you think it's like that?
Oh my God, I think it is massively like that. I mean, if you look at football games is where you notice it the most, is what I'm going to say to you. We have very unusual rights we have to consider with football games compared to any website, any newspaper you read. You can put any picture of a footballer or a football logo or a player's name or a team name. They can just put them anywhere. You know, most of these companies selling you football content, they rely on that. They live on that. But for us, we can't use any of it. You know, it's controlled. And I think the reason it's thought about the reason it's controlled is because the company that is at the top of this tree of making football games, who controls all the rights, wants that control there to price everyone else out of the market. And they've been absolutely brilliant at it for 25 years now. So I think when you're turning over more than $1 billion a year on your game, you can afford to lose a bit on licensing, knowing that no one else can afford that licensing and that you're keeping the competition out. In the same way, you can buy shelf space to make sure that other people's products aren't seen, you know, in general, or loads and loads of stuff. And that's what happens. You know, that is what happens. And with when your publishers are not real publishers, i.e., when most publishers are run by accounting departments, it's not like the old days. I'm lucky enough to have worked with a lot of really good publishing companies in my early years. You know, I worked with Ocean, I worked with Virgin, I worked with Warner, I worked with BT, I worked with people whose first thought is to get a portfolio of decent product, number one, and then to sell it. And that kind of got lost. And then it went just about looking at the numbers all the time. And if you look at the numbers, yes, if you're totally non-creative, in other words, you're artistically
void.
Void, yeah. You don't care. You don't care how crass it is to make boring game 8 and other boring games 16 and that, instead of new game that looks really cool, you know, like mixing a few new bits in with the old or whatever. If you're not thinking like that, you can look to your shareholders and other guys in your accounting department, other senior management as, well, this guy's really good because he knows how to look after the numbers, you know. And I'm not saying we don't need that. Of course we do. What I'm saying is those old publishers, the people like John Woods that used to run Ocean or Tim Chaney that's running Virgin, they had the balance of looking after the numbers, but also looking after the portfolio.
Yeah.
And Ocean made a load of license tie-ins, but they didn't just do license tie-ins. So what I'm saying is, it's having that feeling for the art form you're publishing, not because you're the artist, but because you understand somewhere in the line you and your management team have got to protect your portfolio.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And that, you can see it with films, is where you really, really see it. Like, you get these horrendous remakes or sequels that really, you really shouldn't have done that. You know, you're diluting your quality by not stopping.
Yeah.
And again, if you look at the British model, was it 40 Towers? Was how many episodes? Like 10 or 12 or something?
Yeah.
You know, Blackadder, full series and then stop. And really proper quality stuff, you know?
Yeah.
But knowing when you draw a line, and even though you could squeeze a bit more money out of Blackadder 5, you say, no, we want our credibility, our heritage, our long-term artistic profile is protected by not diluting it with some piece of shit to make a bit more money. I think we find it as Brits vulgar when you just chase the money. There's something unattractive and disgusting about it.
Yeah.
That's my feeling, my gut feeling. And I don't think every culture feels that vulgarity in the same way. I think I would guess that maybe French people are similar to us in this feeling. They seem to have this sense of when something is right and when you don't do that, you know, even if you're making more money, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's just a bit rancid somehow. And you know, even I can say with Sociable Soccer, we could have called this Sensible Soccer. I had the option to do it. I didn't want to because it's not Sensible Soccer. All that's going to do is make all the Sensible Soccer fans complain this isn't Sensible Soccer.
Yeah.
And kind of Sensible Soccer's had its time. And we can get remakes. And I mean, I don't know, 5 years ago, a Russian company made a Cannon Fodder 3, which was commissioned, you know. But that time for that is kind of gone. I mean, you love the Sensible Soccer you can remember in your head and you played when you were younger. Yeah. You know, anything I give, whatever we make, we can't give you your childhood back. And so it's in my mind, it's, although I understand that commercially people would say, why don't you do this? And sometimes I'll get that suggested to me. I think some games could work. I wouldn't mind doing another Wizball kind of game now because it's so old it might be fun.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind Megalomania online because I think that would be amazing. And it's kind of like we couldn't do it in those days. And there's a particular game type that would work really well online, Megalomania.
Yeah.
But with Sensible Soccer, and I'm not saying I won't ever do it, and I might do it, but at the same time, the classic version people talk about isn't the one we did in '98, or we did it again in 2006. Yeah. And 2006 was better. Yeah. It's the one we did in '92 to '96, '97. That's the one everyone remembers.
Yeah.
And with technology, games really exist on machines. So, like, I love Heroes of Might and Magic, but I like Heroes of Might and Magic 3. I can tell you very specifically the one that I like. And it's kind of weird that you get this thing. Or I like Mario Golf, but I like it best on the N64.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't ask me why. That's the one I had and I played the most. So we get locked in these little things. You know, which football team are you a fan of?
I don't know if I should tell you. You might close the Skype call down. It's Liverpool.
Liverpool. Okay. You're having an interesting season.
Yeah. Not what's expected. That's for sure.
No, it's funny. It's almost like they did so much last season, and this season they kind of want to put their feet up a bit.
Yeah.
They're putting them in public right now. That's the problem.
Well, that's it. The problem is to make yourself look like you are a good team. You have to continually do it each season and win it to get that trend going. But when you win it once and then end up nearly 7th or 8th down the table, it sort of makes it look like a bit of a fluke. I think.
You mean like Leicester? You mean like you're now Leicester? It's all right.
Aren't Leicester up? Well, last time I looked, Leicester was 2nd or 3rd. Have they dropped a bit? I've not.
Oh yeah, Leicester. What I'm saying is you're in the equivalent
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they've done amazingly well, I think, in recent years. But yeah, I mean,
Who do you support, by the way?
I'm a Norwich fan.
Okay, well you've got
Norwich.
no need to talk then.
Having an amazing season. Last night we won our 9th game on the spin.
All right.
We are having a really good season. I mean, we're a very weird, not a very weird team. We've clearly mastered how to get out of the championship.
Yeah.
We just haven't mastered how to stay in the league. with Sociable Soccer, I can explain our rollout plan if you like and how we've worked. So the game has always been entirely cross-platform. So we always plan to do around about, well, it's ending up being 10 platforms at the moment. We always plan to cross everything. And when you do that, you have to be really flexible with your approach to which platforms come first. Yeah. Especially now we're working in Unity, which is pretty much platform agnostic. Yeah. Although you do need to do work on each platform to finalize it. So we initially started off thinking we'll work on PC, PlayStation, Xbox first. Yeah. And then we launched the Steam version, as you know, on PC, early access version.
Yeah.
And we persisted with talking to different publishing companies, and I'm talking a lot about the game and who might want to get involved. Yeah. And then the first company to buy was a Chinese mobile company called Crazy Sports, who've done a lot of football games in China. So we're like, okay, good, China, it's a good new market. Yeah. And that meant that for a while we had to focus more on the mobile side. Yeah. So we basically, although we had early access there and it was performing, it wasn't amazing, it was all right, but we got the diehards coming and playing it, which was good. But the game was pretty much a long way from completion, which is why we called it early access. Yeah. And then when Crazy Sports came in, we focused our attention more on the mobile side for a while. Now, what you've got to understand with the game is you've got the core game, which goes to all the platforms. So whatever we do is going to the core. Yeah, but then you've got, like, for example, touch controls, obviously the mobile part. You don't need those in the console side so much.
Yeah.
Maybe. So we focused on that, and that was pretty good. And then a year later, we got the offer to work via a company called Rogue in California, our American partners, with that on the Apple Arcade side, which came as a totally out of the blue to us, actually. But it was brilliant. I mean, financially, it's been brilliant arrangement for us. And the platform's been very good. I mean, when you're on Apple Arcade, there's 150 games on the system. You're not in the sea of a million games.
Yeah, it's not Google Apps.
As with everything, there's a downside. So there's an upside and a downside. The upside is there's not that many games. Apple have been pretty decent to work with. The money has been very good. Our publishers in America have been great. We've really loved working with them. The downside has been some of the processes. So Apple themselves have never done anything like this before to involve themselves in software so much. So they've been learning about how to evaluate software launches before they go on their platform. And they did 150 at once. So they set themselves up a nightmare. So the initial onboarding process was stressful for us developers and probably extremely stressful for the Apple guys. And because it's Apple and because they've got to be extra mindful than other companies about things like data privacy for obvious reasons, we had to go through certain protocols that we wouldn't experience with other platforms, which meant that when you're doing message sharing of any sort, you've got to be extra careful that it's going through certain processes, that it doesn't violate whatever. Yeah. So what that meant with the initial launch, there's certain things we wanted to do that we couldn't find a way to do it to safely stay inside the protocols at the time. And now what we've discovered is Apple have been, I guess with a bit more experience, have understood that maybe certain things are allowable. Once they've got a process now where you can say, okay, rather than just saying don't do stuff, we can now say to them, okay, we propose this. Can you please evaluate our proposition and tell us is that inside or outside of your your rules? So they've added some element of that, and that sounds simple, but that situation has given us 3 different ways to communicate between players that we couldn't do before. Because we're working on mobile, which is the worst case for online stuff. It's not as fast as like PC or hardwired PC, PlayStation or whatever. It means we're getting really, really good level performance, because on the other platforms now we've had to be super performance focused. So now we can start to piece together the online performance, the messaging other players, all these kind of bits that slowly piece the thing together a bit more. And it's going slower than I've wanted, I'll be honest. I've been frustrated at the speed, but we have been very determined as a team. We're tackling all the issues, and we're slowly grinding our way to where we want to be. And the good news for all the PC and console players is that the version we released, which I hope is going to be towards the end of this year, will have all of those teething errors mostly dispelled. So we've been in a long process of putting a game out on Apple Arcade, which has actually been performing pretty well this last year. But it's been a great platform for us to continuously improve the game and get feedback and understand how it's working. And yes, there is some difference between a console audience and a mobile audience, but it's not a huge difference. There are some correlations. So we're starting to understand how some of our clan systems are working, and that's working quite well in some ways, and other things can be improved in other ways. And I think that we've had difficulty level setting problems a bit. So the launch that's currently out, a lot of people are saying is a bit difficult. And now that was because the previous launch, people were saying it was too easy. So we went, okay, we'll just turn the AI up. And now people get difficult. So now we're kind of got to find some balance,
Yeah.
So we're starting to do a little bit more user testing and have a bit more balance and that kind of thing. But it's for me, it's interesting because every game you work on's got a new challenge. We're in a totally different era to Sensible Soccer now. We're practically 30 years ahead of that.
Yeah.
So this is not Sensible Soccer. It's a different game for a different era of people, and it's more about being cross-platform, and it's online, and taking some influences like card collection, which has come from things like Ultimate Team, and then some Sensible Soccer style gameplay a bit, but with alternative ways to control it, so that mobile players can play it as well, and people more used to FIFA can still access it. And we're starting to mature our product now. So whereas we started out with Sensible Soccer as an inspiration mostly, and putting a bit of online play in, then we've started to adapt like I say, card collection, clan play, which is something I've always wanted in from the start, and we've really pushed the clan play in the last release. But now putting in the card collection was added. It wasn't there at the start, focusing on how we do the touch controls, focusing on stuff which is more familiar to FIFA players than initially we'd have done. But now we've started seeing the reality is, whether we like it or not as old Sensible Soccer players, 95% of people pick up a football game and think it's FIFA.
Yeah.
They expect the controls to react like it's FIFA.
Yeah.
And our controls are much more simplified than FIFA, don't get me wrong. But we've realised that we've actually put in the current build 3 different control interfaces. In a nutshell, one is mobile, one is FIFA, and one is Sensible Soccer. That's the easiest way to describe them. But we've realised that we needed to do that so that people can pick the game up, and they can feel familiar with it, and hopefully now these 3 different sorts of people can all play against each other, and then no matter what machine they're on online.
Yeah.
So you end up with some cross-platform, cross-gameplay style football game, which people should be able to pick up with and enjoy a game against each other, and that's where we're getting to now, and have a bit of fun with, So
that sounds good. I can't wait.
We know that because with the arcade, you can use one of these on an iPad.
Yeah.
So we know the controls work really well for console because they work on console controllers. It's literally the platform's different, but obviously the game will feel the same. Yeah. So, and it's already playing really well on Switch. It's playing really well on PC. We have started doing Xbox porting now, so that's there. The PlayStation porting is going to start very soon. So,
exciting times then.
It's really exciting times, yeah. I mean, what we're looking for now is the right publishing partner to take this to market with. So my job right now is to continue to talk to people, and we've been biding our time. We've been waiting, and we've chosen two very good partners so far in Crazy Sports and Rogue to help us on the mobile side, and we've not been in any rush. You know, again, this is what we talk about experience. What I've learned from experience is you time this stuff properly. I mean, it's best to wait for the right partner that's in the right position. There's a certain amount of money we want up front for the game. It's not exorbitant. It's reasonable for what the game is worth, the amount of work we've done. But we also need to know they're going to perform. They're going to do some marketing. Yeah. They can back this game up. They understand the kind of audience we're going to have and work with them and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's quite fun. It's infuriating in a way, but it's also fun. Like you're waiting and waiting for the right fishing line to bite.
I was just about to say it's fishing, isn't it?
It absolutely is. You know, and you know it's kind of weird because as you develop the game, like the last week or two, the stuff we've put in the game with all this social stuff, so you can now talk to the other guy you're playing against. After this build, which we hope to finish within the next month, then we're going to really focus on the big extra structure stuff we're putting in and all of the graphical updates and stuff required on the console side, and then the console side will come out
brilliant
the back this year, and that's what we're doing, and that's kind of how it works. You know, it's I mean, we've shuffled these dates so many times, people are probably sick of us saying it, but that's what happens.
You know what they say, all good things come to those who wait.
Well, exactly. I hope so.
Next time on a Retro Ramble.
I don't know if anyone else saw it coming, but I certainly didn't. That it literally starts. It literally ends where episode 4 starts.
Yeah.
Like to the second, and that was just like, oh my god, that's amazing. They've done it perfectly.
I would just like to say a big thank you to all the special guests who took the time out of their busy schedules to appear on Retro Ramble. It is really much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you for watching this episode of a Retro Ramble with. All links to the special guest channel can be found in the description below this video. If you enjoyed watching, then please like and subscribe and click the bell notification icon to be informed of when the next episode is uploaded.